into a brand new wave, drowning out the noise that's tame. Liberty whispers through the brave, breaking free from every chain. Nullify the rules they crave, crypto beats that pave the way. Anarchy with minds that's safe, algorithms new dawn today. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride. Beyond control we take a stand, casting off the iron brand. Freedom flowing through our hands, revolution's our command. Decentralize the way we plan, all together we expand. Breaking shackles for the clan, in this journey we're unpanned. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride.
Look at us getting chased by the train. That's government, by the way. While we cycle through and escape through the tunnels of New York to the blockchain. I am the legacy of Jennifer and Kaiser. This is Crypto Wednesday, another edition of Legacy News, episode 48. It won't be long until we're on episode 100, and man, that's gonna be fun. We'll have something for you, and hopefully it'll be a Wednesday so we can do something crypto centric. But in the meantime, let us dive in. Let's break some Monero. Let's get a little counter economical, and let's blur the line between reality and reality. Welcome in, Andrew Joseph.
Well. You say one thing, I say it's a ghost train. Well, whoever's going to win here, I think Final Fantasy VI will make the decision.
You just got us pulled. Don't say no. Copyright. That's copyright. You just got a copyright infraction.
It's a great game, man.
Shut your fucking mouth.
Okay.
Oh, get your ass back in this studio right now.
Okay. What's going on, guys?
Not much. What is going on with you, Andrew Joseph?
I'm getting ready for Crypto Wednesday. I want to suplex the train later.
You're going to suplex a train later. How are you going to possibly do that?
Well, it's not going to be me. It's going to be my co-star here.
Oh, who's your co-star?
God, I can't remember his name now. We'll get back to it later.
Oh, Hulk Hogan?
I wish. No, he's the guy that's sitting there running in between me and you on the track there.
Oh, that's Sean.
Blitz attack? Yeah,
that's
I
Sean.
guess it's Sean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Inside
Sean,
joke.
Buzz in reality, making a comeback soon enough. The wait is almost Just be patient, everybody. The wait is
Right?
almost over. But he's there with
No,
us,
no,
man.
it's not.
He's
It's
being
not
chased.
Sean. It's Sabin. Sabin's sitting there running. He's gonna suplex that train in just a minute. That's his part of
I'm
the gig
7.
from the episode. You're not Sabin. You're Cian.
Oh, whatever. I don't fucking remember what names these are. It's been years since I
Okay.
played Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah.
I do want to play through it again.
Good. Well, maybe we should do it for the podcast. Talk
No.
about the background. Oh, okay.
Does it look like we're video game streamers? Is that your next niche?
It could be.
You want a video game stream?
It could be. As long as I can show my feet and make money off of it.
Dude, keep your OnlyFans out of this marketing scheme. Ain't nobody want to see your feet. They want to see your
I don't got
baldness.
time for that.
Market your baldness. That's where the money's at.
Whoa. Is that Bald Man?
That's Bald
Yeah.
Man. Let's get into it. Let's break some Monero. Because we could be little douchebags the whole episode, and we probably put people to sleep. So I'm not here to be Dave Smith, although I am the libertarian Tupac. Fuck you, Dave. I'm the real libertarian Tupac. This is the true bald man himself, Andrew Joseph. So
One of a kind.
yeah, we're in direct competition, and we're forging on. This is not a work. This is a shoot. WrestleMania 42. I'm calling out
Yeah.
Dave Smith.
We got a match
Let's
going
do
on.
this. Yeah, TLC match, Dave.
Robbie's got
You,
his
me.
porch tours. I got the video game tours. Let's go. Come on. Hook me up. Let me know what porch to come to, and I'll play video games with you for a week.
Well, we want Robbie and you involved too. That's why I wanted a TLC match, man. No rules, no DQs, weapons,
Oh.
tables.
ECW. Yeah, there's copyright right there. Oh well.
ECW's copyright?
I
but
guess so. I don't know.
Oh, excuse me, on a live YouTube. Even though it's a brand, it's not a human being.
Yeah.
But
you know what isn't
let's
a
jump
human
into
being
it.
or a brand, but technology? Monero.
I mean, speaking, yes, well, yeah. Monero, I would actually compare to Paul Heyman. It's
Yeah.
just there. It'll always be there, and you can never get rid of Paul Heyman. He is wrestling, just like Monero is crypto.
Like the old Paul Heyman promo against Vince McMahon, with
classic.
the Alliance. Yeah, that was a very good promo.
That was classic. What's also great is, like, you know how he's the wise man to the OTC. Oh, by the way, Andrew, acknowledge me.
I acknowledge no one.
Acknowledge me. I'm your tribal chief. Speaking of that,
the flowers of
triple
evil.
threat.
That's the only thing I acknowledge. Haku no Hana.
Well, what's great is that triple threat, like, official Seth Rollins, CM Punk, and Roman Reigns. That's going to probably steal the show. I hope it does.
I hope.
But yeah,
they're
what's
apparently putting
cool
together a good program.
Oh, for real, it seems like it. And what's cool about that is, like, CM Punk on the latest Raw. I'm getting to the Monero, everybody. But CM Punk at the latest Raw made a hint.
Yeah.
See, that it knows your Flowers of Evil knows where I'm coming at. But he made a hint, and he did the wink. He's like, you're not the only one with a wise man. Wink, wink.
Oh, I see.
It's like Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman has some sort of there's something brewing in this storyline, man, that involves Paul Heyman, Roman Reigns, CM Punk. That's gonna be glorious. I'm also trying to figure out if maybe they're opening up to, like, reform the Shield eventually, and CM Punk becomes the next third man, and then that would be interesting, actually. Have them fight each other out, and then they reform the Shield, but with CM Punk.
Sure.
So, but I digress. Let's jump into Paul Heyman's.
Finally,
story.
we can go back to the product at hand. WCW. I'm just kidding. Things back there.
ECW. Let's get it.
Crypto
Let's get
Wednesday.
extreme.
Crypto Wednesday. Crypto Wednesday. I'm clicking my heels, baby. Let's go.
And it's on there.
Ready? All right.
Hello and welcome back to Breaking Monero, the series where we critically look at some of Monero's privacy and security limitations in order to inform people about better what these are. I'm back as Justin. We have Sarang back on today. Also, we're happy to have you today. Today we're talking about timing attacks. Now, timing attacks are another very nuanced topic. There's things that sort of get right and wrong, right? And so we want to help explain the situation a little bit better for people so that they have a better understanding about what information can be learned about them, and then end with some key takeaways that users can use and consider as they're sending transactions. So Sarang, can you start us off about some of the considerations about when you are running a node, what the sort of limitations are there for individuals?
Sure. So, I mean, the idea behind running a node is that you may be relaying transactions from other nodes onto the network, which, of course, is how the network basically learns about transactions. But you yourself may be, constructing transactions and sending them yourselves. So, timing about when your node is active, for example, when it is accepting incoming connections and making outgoing connections to other nodes, may reveal a little bit of information about the transaction structure. So, for example, if I have a node that's running 24/7 and has a whole bunch of transactions passing through it, it may be more difficult for an adversary to determine which of those transactions I'm simply relaying on and which actually originated from me. But of course, if I only come online every so often for a brief period of time, send out a transaction or two, and then go back offline, that may be an indication to that adversary that the transactions that are being sent out were in fact originated by me. So the timing about when a node is running is something to consider. And of course, we know that in general, the more nodes that are online relaying transactions, that increases the security of the network anyway.
So do you think it's fair to say that if an adversary was trying to have a high level of knowledge over the network, they would try and prioritize, or they would look first at nodes that they've recently connected to and then have disconnected over a short period of time?
I mean, it's difficult to say what methods an adversary might use, but that's a pretty strong one. So, in general, if you're going to be using a node, it's probably best to be running it all the time and allow a lot of transactions to kind of, filter through it and be relayed in order to ensure that your own transactions are as hidden as possible within that crowd.
Thanks, Ryan. And it's worth noting, too, that this isn't really a Monero-specific recommendation for other security and privacy software like Tor and I2P. They generally recommend that users run the software all the time, even if you're not using it. So you should not just run an I2P router only when you're routing on the I2P network. Likewise, you should not run a Monero node only if you want to sync and broadcast transactions. You should ideally try and run it the whole time. Okay, so what about when you're syncing with remote nodes, Sarang?
Well, we were talking a bit about this earlier before the recording about how the structure is a little bit different. Of course, we talked about remote nodes and some of the limitations and the trust that you're implicitly placing in a remote node. If you connect, for example, with a mobile device that doesn't have the capability to run one on its own. So one thing to keep in mind is that, especially if you're running on, say, a mobile device whose IP and, apparent geolocation is going to be changing over time. If you connect to a remote node, for example, you request blocks that you haven't seen yet. So, for example, if I run a Monero wallet on my phone, for example, that's connecting to some, open remote node, that node sees that I request a certain number of blocks, and then, I maybe go offline and stop connecting to it because I'm done for a while. And then from a different location, a different IP, I appear to perhaps be a different identity. I might connect to that same remote node again and start requesting the next set of blocks. So if the remote node is keeping track of, which entities are requesting which sets of blocks, the node might make inferences about, if I am in fact that same entity, even though, my phone is connecting from a different IP.
Interesting. Thank you, Sarang. So to move on a little bit, we can sort of summarize like when people should send transactions and what people can really do to mitigate some of this information. And there's a number of basic strategies that we sort of have outlined. And they each sort of come with their own drawbacks, unfortunately. So you can say that users can send them randomly. You should literally pick a random time over a day interval, but then maybe you would choose an off-peak time with the Monero network, and maybe the only people sending transactions during that time are usually those that are sending them according to a random parameter. Or perhaps if you set them under certain times when more people are likely to use them, it could be a more predictable behavior that you sort of try and observe. So ultimately, it's hard to say which one's really the best, because you can really develop a heuristic for both of these, and we don't really know which one is more powerful. But just know that there's sort of limitations with both of these two different types of strategies and how people approach them. And we can look to sort of the Zcash turnstile process to see how they have sought to limit some of the timing attack metadata as people send funds from a shielded sprout address to a transparent address to a shielded sapling address. That with their sort of turnstile process, they made it so you try and fit in with the rest of the crowd. In a way, it was sort of like an interactive process where you try and make sure many people are doing it at the same time. And that's the main point of that, is actually to help with timing attacks, to help make it so that it's not obvious that only one entity is transacting over certain periods of time. Sarang, one question a lot of people have with the Monero wallet, and it's kind of a user experience drawback, is that we limit people to have at least 10 confirmations for their transactions before they're able to send another one. Why does Monero do this, and what are the real benefits from this?
Well, the idea, one of the ideas behind this is that, we've talked before, kind of way back when we talked a bit about forks in the network, that, the network and the chain will tend to kind of fork itself, in very small and kind of limited ways, just because different miners, may come up with different blocks around the same time and kind of create these teeny little tributary style forks, but eventually those kind of just get rolled into one solid chain. So, on one hand, we want to make sure that, users have enough confirmations to ensure that the outputs that they are sending, are on the main chain. And how many blocks does that take? Well, statistically, we know that the more blocks you wait, the more likely it is that you are in fact on the main chain. And the longest kind of reorganizations of chains that we've seen are maybe on the order of 20 blocks. These are extremely rare. It's more likely that the number we set, something like 10 blocks, ensures that you're very, very likely on the main chain without kind of degrading the user experience too much. And of course, you can probably talk about other benefits that we get to this as well.
Yeah, sure. On top of that too, like you don't want to generate transactions with decoys that were generated on a chain that doesn't exist anymore, right? Like that's unfortunate, because either the transaction might not be properly verified. Actually, that's a good question, Sarang. Would the transaction just not be verified, or would it be verified with information that everyone would know would be false?
It would have to be with information that is relative to that node's knowledge of the chain.
Okay. So interesting. Okay, so you couldn't send a transaction using a decoy on one chain and then it to be included on another one.
And again, like this is one of the things that eventually small tributary forks kind of I want to say just kind of go away eventually as a solid single main longer chain is established over time. So
yeah,
in general, it's good to wait. It's not really a consensus thing. It's a wallet thing, but it's there for good reason. And it's also worth noting too that the way we talked earlier about the way that we select decoys, and there's all sorts of considerations with that, some of which are very subtle. But it's worth noting that the decoy selection algorithm that in some sense takes some kinds of timing into account also does in fact account for this.
Yeah. So
it's
exactly.
one of the things
So
where
like
if you're doing the default behavior, in that sense, the output selection is taking it into account.
Yeah, and I think so. To summarize the sort of the 10 confirmation window for people is to make sure that their transactions get broadcast.
You can sell this $5 spatula on Amazon and compete with hundreds of other spatula sellers
On the correct chain, and that they're seeing that actually happens. And then it's also to say that the selection, it's to account for latency issues with the selection algorithm too, where not everyone would necessarily see everything except for a certain period of time. So we need to make sure that the whole network really has visibility over this transaction before you just start to try and send another. Does that summarize it pretty well?
To make a long story longer, sure.
Perfect. All right. So what about some of the connections between IP addresses and timing? We're going to have a separate episode entirely on IP addresses, go much more in detail there. But what about the portions that are related specifically to like the incremental advantage that timing could provide for an adversary?
Well, I mean, so an adversary who is looking for example, connecting to you and is aware of your IP address. Of course, we know there's some things involving geolocation of IP addresses. There's also information about timing caused by, what transactions are coming out of that, what time is that node active. You can make a lot of inferences based on activity, for example, based on things like time zone, which could give you inferences about location. So there's a lot of like little pieces of metadata that are kind of floating around there. If for example, you can make an inference about a user's time zone, you might make an inference about, when they're likely to be asleep and therefore probably not active sending any transactions on the network. All of this gives out some little heuristic information about when you see transactions, what you know about when that user is likely to send transactions of their own. And again, this goes back to the whole idea of, can I infer that a transaction that I see coming out of a node is just being relayed on from somebody else, or in fact originated from that node? And of course, the idea ideally is that you don't want that to be determinable. So you want to ensure that all transactions appear like they're equally likely to have come from you or just from someone else. And I'm sure that, if you think about it hard enough, you can come up with a whole lot of different heuristics that an adversary might try to use based on your IP and different forms of timing, time zone, and location and all of that.
Are there any last comments you want to add on timing metadata before we move on to the sort of actionable information for people?
Just that, some of the things are fairly specific to Monero. For example, the way that, we have to select decoys and therefore have to account for certain timing things. But, a lot of these other things are a lot more general to kind of the way that networks are generally set up, the way that routing happens, the way that in general transactions are broadcast in a way that might not be specific to Monero, but might be common to other, assets like Bitcoin and Litecoin, for example. But just that, in general, the goal with a lot of these things is to ensure that you, are basically hidden in a crowd and don't stand out in what you're doing. And of course, there's different kind of mitigations and solutions that can, that folks are trying to come up with to mitigate this. For example, kind of like network level solutions like Tor and I2P and other things you might have heard of, to different kinds of routing solutions. There's different proposals on, how to change the way that your node connects to and routes transactions in order to make sure that an adversary observing the whole network is less likely to be able to determine any information. So, like many things and like many things involving network theory, there's a lot of different layers that we can act at. But, Monero, as always, tries very hard to apply an iterated, layered approach to its privacy, and we continue to iterate on that kind of at the routing and network layer as well, albeit maybe more slowly than we'd like.
Yeah, it really is its own sort of topic, this conversations, because it's not, we don't just need to learn from Monero's history. We can really pull from any peer-to-peer network to learn more. So for this actionable information, we have some few basic steps for people. The first and most obvious one is, if you can, run your own full node, and when you're running it, keep it running 24/7, right? Make sure it's always connected. Don't only run it and sync it when you're trying to send transactions. You should ideally be contributing all the time, so you're constantly sending information back and forth. You're sending transactions onto other nodes that you don't even send, and as a result, it just helps you ultimately with your security. But also, one thing that that I think is pretty interesting is if you run an open node, sort of like a Monero world style node that you use, that other people connect to your node for in order to send transactions through you, that can actually help your privacy by making it so that many other people are sending transactions through your node, not just you. So in addition to all the other normal propagation data that's being sent from your node, you're also getting brand new information from other people that's coming from your node for the first time. So if an adversary is observing your node, they will struggle to differentiate transactions that you send out compared to transactions that other people send out. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think about a sort of like transaction delay string?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that can be helpful. I mean, I think that can be helpful as well, right? Some
Best and worst dinner foods for your gut.
Sweet potatoes. Try to find the purple sweet potato.
Some people
Get rid of
and
the
other
eggs.
projects as well might advocate the idea of delaying when a transaction is sent out relative to when the transaction is actually constructed or made on your device, and that can be helpful. Anything that you can do to ensure that any patterns in your transaction behavior are in some sense kind of randomized is generally a good thing. To what extent you should do that randomization over what time period, I would say that that's kind of up for debate. It might depend on other factors involving, patterns in network activity. But, in general, if you can do it, it's probably worth your while.
So, Sarang, ultimately, we spent some time talking about the timing attacks. Is this really a consideration that most people really need to concern themselves with?
Like a lot of other things, I think it really depends on your particular threat and risk model. A lot of it might depend on, whether or not you're operating through, VPNs or other kinds of anonymity networks, whether or not you are concerned about adversaries observing, your network activity in particular, or kind of the global network activity across the entire Monero network. It could have to do with how well connected you happen to be to the internet, and to other peers on the network, which, might depend on the level of trust you placed in your ISP or kind of the internet backbone around you. I know that for most people, what we try to do, and I guess what we're trying to do going forward, is ensure that the way that we develop, the way that the software routes connects to other nodes on the network, and even other things like network layer solutions, ideally try to kind of make some of this transparent to the user. I would say that it's probably not something that a lot of people think about very often. And frankly, a lot of people are probably, privileged enough to not have to maybe worry about this for their particular use cases. But if this is something that does concern you, then, some of these mitigations are something that you probably want to consider when you're using Monero, or for that matter, just doing general network connectivity at all.
All right. Any final comments you want to have on this topic?
It's very subtle, and for every mitigation that you come up with for some kind of timing analysis, there's probably another heuristic that a very, very determined or different adversary might use. And that's not to say that you should kind of come up with kind of fall into an analysis paralysis trap of saying, well, there will always be new heuristics, so why use this at all? As always, this is kind of a cat and mouse game for which we try to iterate, maybe sometimes more slowly than we'd like, but we do still iterate and improve on it.
Okay, thank you, Sarang. Thanks again for everyone who watched. This has been Breaking Monero. We will catch you next time. Bye.
See ya.
Welcome back.
This is Breaking Monero. We will catch you next time. Peace, everybody. I'm just kidding. But interesting segment to speak of.
What is wrong with
discussing-
sweet potatoes? I love sweet potatoes. Sorry, I didn't realize I was mute.
That's because you're in the dudes. No.
Help me.
I
had the weirdest
digress.
podcast co-host. Anyways,
I call it as I sees it, man.
yeah, right.
But one thing that they're really suggesting on this for this topic is they're trying to hammer in that risk management that everybody should be seeking forth in anything that you get yourself into. Doesn't have to necessarily be crypto. It's just everyday life, finances, work, your home, your family. Like, there's risk to everything. And so there's going to be risks in anything that you set forth your mind to.
Yeah.
So the first question that I have to ask you, Andrew, is they discussed what a continuous transaction is. And so with that, why would a continuous transaction be a better security feature against, say, hackers and their tools to scam you out of your wallet?
Think about it this way. In video games a couple years ago, there was it's like an anti-piracy mechanism that you were required to be always connected to the internet whenever you were playing a particular software title, right? Because they feel like if it was just something that they tried to implement and push within the industry. especially for like Steam. If you're always connected to the network, then it's really hard to distinguish unless it's specifically programmed and do it to pick up when you're actually playing, where you're at, what you're doing, and if it's you or somebody else that's been playing, right? It's the same way with Monero. If you are connected to the Monero network once every
Mhm.
Tuesday at the end of the month, then it's leaving fingerprints, identification marks, saying this particular user is on the Monero network Tuesday at 2 p.m. At the end of every month, and he's always connected to the same network. That's why you need to diversify, and maybe Tuesday and then Wednesday and then back to Tuesday and then Friday, and just do it throughout the month.
It's no different from the atom and how atoms were all created out of atoms, immaterial, material, biological, non-biological, right? We all have an atomic structure. We're all electric. We're all electrically charged, positive and negative, and the electrons are a constant flow. That's how you bring about. That's just how chemistry works. You have this constant flow of electrons moving and scattering and going from one atom to another, combining elements, etc., etc. So it's a constant flow. So it's easy. It's a lot. It's a lot less. It's a lot more difficult for mistakes to be had. Obviously, the world's not perfect, but it's a lot harder to distinguish what is a weakness if you're constantly flowing.
Yeah,
You get what I'm saying? So,
yeah,
very
constantly
very good.
available, and
Oh, go ahead.
constantly. This kind of gets into probably some of the questions that you're gonna have later, but constantly available, and like I said, constantly sending transactions, right? And I'll try to dip into that later, but just keep that in mind for the next possible couple
Well,
questions.
yeah, another example would be algorithmically. We're all tied onto the internet, especially if you're a content creator, a podcaster, streamer, whatever. You want to get your content out there. You want to beat the algorithm. You want to get people to actually be able to view or listen to what you're putting out there on the internet. If you're just, you don't even have to be we're all content creators as long as we're on social media just commenting, right? So you want to get your piece, your perspective out there, even if it's just as little as being on Facebook, commenting on some bullshit post about why boomers are stupid. You're justified to this algorithmic scale. You're scaling up, and so you want to get that content to retract, or to both retract and contract. You want to expand it and be able to recede it. And if you're not putting forth the effort to continuously put that content out, even if it's just as little as a comment on Facebook or YouTube in the comment section, then you're
Comment
going
down
to be
below.
buried. Yeah, comment down below. You're going to be buried. You're not going to, the algorithm's going to bury you. And that's effectively what they mean by you not being in a constant, continuous foil. Because if you're just sticking to a plan that's very stagnant, that's where weaknesses and vulnerabilities are found.
That's right. You don't want to be involved in a double shovel burial, especially if you're a
Hmm.
podcast called A Legacy, right?
Yep. So, but also another thing that they use, because of the variability of increasing and expanding your location and traversing off of different IPSs and IPs and etc. It's the use of
DNS.
mobile devices. Yeah. So are mobile use nodes actually a better solution?
Well, that was something I was going to talk. As I said, come back to this. they were talking about having people come in and transact on your through 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 your node, right? And it reminded me of a video I saw, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, a year ago, maybe, from Mental Outlaw, and he was running a Tor node, the Onion router node, over his wireless router. If you have a Monero network, Monero World, I think is what they called it, over your wireless router, and it's constantly going, if you can cycle in your transactions along with a whole bunch of other people's, you're significantly contributing more security to the network because it's harder to verify whose transaction was what. The problem with that is
Yeah. It's
the
harder
one
for the It's harder for the Indians and the Pakistanis to figure out who they should be scamming next if everybody's just constantly transacting.
The problem with that is if the device has been hacked and captured by outside
Everybody's
actors
fucked.
too, by threat actors, they can feed in transactions that specifically they know are theirs, and they can filter out just yours and see and use it as a heuristic, as they call it, to trace your particular behavior on the network.
So basically, in order to secure yourself, as well as other people securing themselves through continuous activity, there are trade-offs.
Yes. And
So
a way that they can do that is on computer hardware. If it's either a hardware attack or a software attack, an exploit through the software kernel, for example, they can overwrite that. It's called a NAND file or a NAND chip. It's the firmware and the operating system that the router uses to operate. If they are able to gain full control over the system because it has been updated in like 20 years, for example, then you just leaving not only yourself up to be vulnerable, but anybody that connects that doesn't know that you're not, up to date on all the latest software and stuff like that.
So the next question is about verification. But
Yeah.
I want your thoughts. They've already explained theirs. So what would be your best idea for a chain verification in transaction?
I mean, the 10 transaction count, I think it's a good median. It never really stops because there's always miners that are reconfirming the transaction. So 1 or 2 transaction confirmations is kind of narrow. 10 is starting to get up there. 20 might be, if you're waiting for that, you might be waiting a while. It depends on where you're at. So I think 10 to 12 is probably a good medium, especially if you have an unstable internet connection.
So are you saying that this technology is just like any technology, like going back and forth between blockchain and say AI or any type of technology that can be innovated, adapted? It's all a net positive? Yes, you have your drawbacks. Yes, when bad actors get involved, you can have your negative drawbacks. Bad things occur when bad people do bad things. That's just inevitable. But technology, specifically with blockchain and specifically through the Monero chain, the Monero networks, is in fact a net positive.
Well, there's white hat hackers and black hat or hackers in every field. It doesn't matter if it's computer science or if it's engineering or if it's psychology. You're always going to have that 50-50 shot of somebody not being working for your best interest, but only for theirs.
But to your opinion, I don't want a straight up factual answer. I want your opinion at this point. Do you think it's a net positive where technology is going, or do you think inevitably it's going to fall into the hands of bad actors?
I think no matter what, as long as it's open source, there's always going to be somebody that's going to move the goalposts forward and improve the implementation of ideas.
like liberals.
Hey, man, Montesquieu was a good guy.
But it's all about risk management. It really is. It's about how you use that device to your own actions when you're on the blockchain. So you have to protect yourself. You always have to protect yourself. It doesn't matter. There are better routes to take to protect yourself and your assets and your secured person, specifically on the internet, that reflects, especially since we're talking about assets, reflects your real life. But you have to manage yourself well. You got to keep your eye out. You got to be vigilant, but at the same time, you got to know that life is not a box of chocolates, unlike what Forrest Gump says. Because chocolate is good. Chocolate is awesome. There's little bits and pieces of different chocolates and different flavors. Great. That's a great analogy for people. But at the same time, we're all for diversification on a politically correct racial quality, I guess. But in reality, the box of chocolates is not your friend, because the box of chocolates is a fantasy. Life will always give you lemons. Sometimes you have to do something with those lemons. Are you going to suck on the lemon and get a sour taste and pucker and not want to touch a lemon ever again? Or are you going to turn those lemons into lemonade? Something delicious. It all starts with you.
Original intent, baby.
So I would go ahead, explore this with us, continuously explore this with us. Let's keep on breaking Monero next week. We will be on episode 9. This was episode 8, so we're cranking this out. And while you're at it, do your own research on Monero. You can go to what is the website, Andrew? Getmonero.com, right? Something like that. I just had it.
I believe so. Hold on just a second. Let me see.
There are many different videos on there that you can watch it and explore.
Getmonero.org.
Getmonero.org. Getmonero.org. That'll be in the description for the release of this episode. But getmonero.org. They got tons of content on there that you can explore for videos, learn a little bit more. You should be able to see the old video that explains it too. That documentary as well should be on there. And you can also go check out Breaking Monero. Just type it into YouTube. It'll pop right back up. And you can watch that on your own as well. And I implore you, another thing about getmonero.org is you can find the PDF of the white paper, the original white paper of Monero. And I would just read it. Even if you just, you don't necessarily have to read it in full, even if it's just a breeze. Even if you want to take some time with it, I would look it over. I would read it. I would analyze it. I would just get very well reversed on Monero, and you'll understand it a little bit more for what it's doing. But
God knows you can read it better than I could.
You probably could. I mean, Andrew's pretty illiterate. It's the baldness, everybody.
I know.
But with that, any other comments, questions for yourself, Andrew? Questions for me? Questions for the audience?
Well, let's just put it this way. As long as I'm up for Retard of the Year, my reading will decrease.
You're not winning. You're not beating me for Retard of the Year, dude. You will always be second place. I am the big retard. All right? I'm retard of the century. You know what? You can have retard of the year. I'm retard of the century.
I'm Dirty Dan.
All right, Dirty Dan. And with that, go follow retard_news at retard_news on X. Get this guy pumped up and ready, because that is the real news. Let's destroy the legacy media with retard news. This has been another edition of Legacy News, Crypto Wednesday. And I think we're out.
God help us
I
all.
think that's it. So you want to go find the exit there, Andrew? Go ask that very nice man in the corner.
All right. Hold on just a second. Thanks for watching, guys.
Peace.
I'm going to go check it out with them.
I'm going to have to leave now, but I was sure I came in by that door over there. Hey, man, where's the door to get out of here?
Oh, it's right over there, sir.
Right over where?
The exit sign? Exit sign? It's that door right there.
That red sign?
Yeah, just go right that way.
Okay.
I think it went down the wrong door.
Where am I? Hey, what the fuck's wrong with you? That's not the right door.
Sir, you're gonna want to go to the one with the exit. You went to the door to the side there.
I went to the right doors. Where you pointed me to, you fuck.
I pointed you to the exit.
Man, you're fucking with the wrong guy.
I'm sorry.
You see this bulge on my hip? You know what that is?
That's a gun.
That's a Glock. You're fucking with the wrong guy.
Yeah.
Don't ever send me to the wrong door.